Since time immemorial, hunters have gone into the field with the hopes of a successful hunt, so they might return to their communities to share the meat. It's even a behavior seen in some of our closest primate relatives. So this is something that is part of us, buried in our genetic makeup and reinforced by the brain, by the good feelings we enjoy when we come together to share food. Today, an increasing number of hunters across the country return from the field and share a successful harvest beyond their immediate social connections. In doing so, helping those in need and addressing deer management objectives at the same time. Venison donation programs are the subject of this episode of Conservation Cooperative. Hey, welcome back to the Conservation Cooperative, a production of the New England and New York chapters of Backcountry Hunters and Anglers. My name is Chris, and as you know, we're going to learn how venison donation programs are making a difference in our communities and on the landscape. As I learned while working on this episode, those impacts are significant and meaningful in ways I didn't expect. I should have, though, because as someone as immersed in the hunting and fishing community as I am, everywhere I look, I see examples of people with a passion for family, the outdoors, and food. These are the type of people that naturally step up to help others in the wild places they love. Take, for example, Venison for Vermonters. It's a program that was started by two game wardens, Sergeant Jeff Whipple and Warden Abigail Serra, who recognized a need in the communities they patrol and also call home.
We are the ultimate community police officers. We live in our communities. We participate in our communities. We both come from small towns and live in small towns now. I live in a town of 400 and something people.
That's Supervisory District Sergeant Jeff Whipple, a ninth-generation Vermonter, hunter, and angler.
So we're there and we're embedded in that community and we care about it. And I think kind of when it started, I had a case several years ago where I had a deer poacher kill a deer out of season. It was 1 or 2 days after the close of the muzzleloader season. This is late December. I picked up the case and followed it just like we do all the time. Ended up finding the person, finding the deer, and it was kind of a unique scenario. I've made hundreds of deer poacher arrests, and maybe this is the only time that this particular family may be needed. I'm going to air quotes here. But this particular person had been incarcerated for about 6 months prior. The Christmas holiday was coming. He didn't have a lot of money, and that was what he felt like he could do to provide for his family. So because of probation, the person had to be incarcerated through Christmas, so he had to go back to jail. I had to take the deer because it was illegal. But on Christmas Eve, I showed back up with his family, wife and 2 kids, and I had a box of meat from roadkill, deer that I had processed, and then some stuff I have a small farm too, and we, raise pigs and chickens and turkeys. So I had put together kind of just a meat box saying, hey, this will get you through, until this particular person can come home.
That was one of Sergeant Whipple's first drop-offs and a story he would later share with Warden Serra.
So Jeff was actually my field training officer. I was his first trainee ever. He told me that story and I thought that was so cool. And that's something I took with me to my district and it made a big impact on me. I had a situation that was, I guess, along the same lines, maybe in some ways. I had a guy that he was trying to barter trout to get some beef, and it's not legal to sell trout, and bartering's, a method of selling. So I had to deal with that issue, but talking to him, I found out that he actually had just gotten out of jail and he didn't have really a lot of money and ways to obtain food. And he was just trying to provide for himself, essentially. So that's in my district. That's whenever I cut up my first deer for somebody and gave him the meat. And then that was pretty close to COVID. So 2020. And that's when Jeff and I officially started the program.
The Warden Service has always been giving away whole animals, ones that were either confiscated or found after being hit on the road. They usually go to folks who can process the meat themselves and often to those who could really use it.
The Venison for Vermonters program is simply that we process the meat and give it to people that maybe wouldn't be able to process it themselves. And that's what I was seeing in my district in Rutland City. You have a lot of people that don't have, they live in apartments, second-story apartments. I did when I first moved there, and I realized how difficult that is. It's hard to hang up a deer in the city and cut it up. So, and then a lot of times those people are the exact people that need the meat the most. So Jeff and I started the program in 2020, and Jeff just so happens to have a good friend that has a butcher shop, and so we started cutting up meat in that butcher shop near where Jeff lives. And that year we had a lot of moose hit. I don't know why.
Yeah, it was wild.
We had so many moose, so we were able to process like over 3,000 pounds of meat that first season, and then the program just kind of went on from there.
Initially, the two wardens were cutting all these deer and moose on their free time. But when the COVID pandemic hit and restrictions were put in place, they were granted permission to do some processing while on duty. That turned out to be critically important for a lot of people. In Vermont, food insecurity increased by 33% during the pandemic. Shelves were bare everywhere, and basic supply chains that fed the region sputtered. Since the Venison for Vermonters start in 2020, the program has donated 10,000 pounds of cut and wrapped deer, moose, and bear. Donations are brought to a bunch of different food shelf organizations all over the state, as well as individuals and outreach events from time to time. They've grown to include several processors and also have a number of other wardens participating. Food insecurity isn't just an issue in rural parts of the region. It's widespread and, by all accounts, getting worse. High inflation, rising housing and food costs, and the end of pandemic-era aid are all to blame. 12.2% of households in the Northeast face food insecurity. The issue disproportionately affects communities of color and often hits children the hardest. Venison donation programs take on a lot of different forms across the country. So to get a slightly wider view than what I'm familiar with here in the Northeast, I reached out to a colleague of mine over at the National Deer Association for some perspective.
My name is Catherine Appling-Pooler. I am the Director of Policy at the National Deer Association. I oversee our state advocacy initiatives in all 50 states, as well as our federal work. And I also oversee our National Venison Processor Map, which has been kind of one of the first steps in our growing involvement in venison donations, specifically in areas that are experiencing an overabundance of white-tailed deer.
I asked Catherine, what generally drives participation in these programs?
So really, when you donate, you get to enjoy more time in the woods, participate in sound wildlife management, and support your neighbors and your community. So it's a win-win-win. I want to say by donating a deer, you are first and foremost participating in wildlife management. Hunters are the best conservation tools we have, especially when it comes to managing wildlife populations. Many donation programs actually started because of population management. And of course, wildlife managers trying to, keeping with the North American model of conservation, do not want meat to go to waste. And wildlife is a shared resource, so meat should not go to waste and shouldn't be wasted at all. So what better way to ensure that wild game isn't wasted than donating it to your local food bank or food pantry?
A win-win-win, all based on supporting management, which attempts to address a number of different issues, typically stemming from an overabundance of deer on the landscape.
When you have an overabundance of deer, they can cause some damage. They can cause some problems, whether that be human conflict or human wildlife conflict, such as, vehicle collisions. That can be crop depredation and conflict with farmers and ranchers and ag community. Overabundance of deer can lead to poor forest conditions because of overgrazing and things like that. So there definitely can be a negative impact with that. When you can control the population and then you are harvesting enough deer, you'll see benefits from those kind of on the wildlife management, natural resource management side.
Many communities in eastern Massachusetts have an astoundingly high deer density. And recently, the state has been pulling on nearly every lever they can to address the issue. Martin Feehan is the state's deer and moose biologist. He oversees all regulatory management and research relating to deer and moose in Massachusetts. He also has helped develop the state's venison donation program called Hunters Share the Harvest.
Well, Mass Wildlife had tried for a long time to get a venison donation program operating in Massachusetts. There were a lot of regulatory hurdles that kept blocking the agency from doing so, and that it blocked any outside organization from also forming. And so that was a huge barrier just to be able to establish a program. When I started in 2021, it was really my first goal to get a program going. It's really a essential tool when you're talking about community-based deer management. And so for me, a lot of the things I needed to do for modernizing deer management would not be possible if we didn't get a program going. And so I spent nearly a year focused almost exclusively on this, trying to work with Mass Department of Public Health to work out a understanding as to how we could make the program operate. And through that process, we were able to get a pilot going with a single processor, John Haskins in Hanover, Mass, that we piloted beginning in the shotgun season in 2022. And we've really just had incredible growth since then, going from just that one processor in 2022 to 3 processors in 2023 to 8 processors in 2024 to 18 this season. And so we've just continued to see incredible growth.
The growth has been remarkable. This year, the program will have likely processed 500 deer. And since the program's inception in 2022, more than 90,000 meals have been distributed to families in need. A core tenet of that initial pitch to the state was maintaining high standards and working with qualified processors who are paid a full rate for their work.
So all of the deer that are donated in our program have to be brought to one of our participating processors, whole but field dressed, and they have to be field dressed within 4 hours after being shot, unless the ambient air temperature is below 37 degrees Fahrenheit. They, no matter what, have to be brought in within 24 hours. At those processors, each processor has a predetermined decision as to whether they're going to have either pork or beef fat added. And then we have them set always at a 10% pork or beef fat, with the exception of the islands where we have some venison that is kept without any fat added, that is distributed particularly to the tribes that want to have it as traditional venison. For most of the state, it is always ground and then has the pork or beef fat added. And then also each processor will either be doing it in 1 or 2 pound packages. From there, our staff actually do all of the transit between processors and each distributor. That way we have clear chain of custody of that venison along the way for food safety. And then it goes to a network of more than 25 primary distributors, including many of the major food banks. And each one of those food banks then have distribution networks across the state. So at this point, we actually have distribution in over 200 towns across Massachusetts. There weren't really primary obstacles with it, but I will say it's actually been one of the most exciting things to see over time how much it has become the favorite item at so many of our distributors. We have sort of varying models depending on the distributor, but one of the great examples is really Daniel's Table in Framingham, where their client base is predominantly immigrants. And so they discovered a long time ago, actually, with just a lot of the regular items that go through a food pantry, like pancake mix, for example, that if you see these things on the shelf, but you don't know what it is, you're not likely to take it, and you're not going to be able to utilize it in the proper ways that would make your family excited to bring them home. And so they started a program a long time ago where they bring in professional chefs once a week to actually show clients how to utilize the different things they have within the pantry program. And then they have a reason to, get excited about it and bring it home. And they did that the very first week that we had venison through Daniel's Table. And after that, it became one of the hottest items, and it has continued to do so, where it's usually one of the first things taken off as part of their market day each week.
Okay, I'm not known for being brief, so I'm going to do my best to give a capsule. Okay. So Daniel's Table started just about 12 years ago.
Meet Alicia Blais, Programs Director for Daniel's Table. She and her husband, David, are also its founders.
So we bought a little food truck and we started going to subsidize housing with a free meal. We'd go 2 nights a week and we'd go play, like, because it's a housing, you already know that there's a need because you had to apply to get the housing. And you know there's going to be a lot of families with children because that's who lives there. And it was great. We fed about 80 families at each location. We said, okay, great. So we're only giving one meal. That's not really super. So we started bringing groceries with us. We started laying boxes out on the sidewalk. So they get a hot meal and they take groceries. Still, we're like, all right, this is not sustainable. We own a restaurant. We live in Braintree. We come, everything we made was from scratch. So like we cook, we open, we close, we take out the food truck, we bring it back, we sanitize it, we go home, repeat. So anyhow, long story short, we went on with this and then finally realized that the need was great. We could choose to continue our restaurant, which was doing well. We were in our 7th year, so we had gotten over the bump. And then the old Registry of Motor Vehicles building opened up for sale. We decided to buy it, and we decided to go full on to be a nonprofit and to sell the restaurant to do it. So we built a kitchen there, and we started doing groceries. We do a client choice market style. So fresh produce, dry goods, meats, cheeses, dairy, what have you. People shop for them. They come through and they shop. Our clients are families that have children 18 or under, or themselves are 60 or over and have a need.
And it's grown from there. More options in the market style space, cooked meals, a freezer program that offers nutritionally balanced meals with multiple locations for pickup, including a local oncology center so cancer patients have access to nutritious food. And as Martin described, educational programming, basically cooking demos and tasting so families can learn how to make the most of the food offerings available. I asked Alicia what her reaction was to the offer of processed venison from the state.
They called me, I'm saying like it was years ago now, and said, we would like to donate, venison to your program. And I said, oh, no. You go talk to the health department before I talk. Don't even look at me until you go through them. And they had to work with them. I think it was like 2 years before the program. Before then, I said, when you get all that settled with them, and if they approve it, I'll gladly work with you. And that was the end of the conversation. I think it was 2 years. All of a sudden, I get a call going, hi, I don't know if you remember me, but we've jumped through all the hoops. We've crossed all the T's, dotted all the I's. And the health department said, we are free to work with you. Fabulous. I did cringe. I had the cringe factor. I don't eat a lot of red meat, period. And I said, oh, venison. Oh my God. I said, I'll try it. I said, I don't know that any of our clients will take it. I will try cooking with it because I do the prepared meals. And no, just, bring me, I don't know how much you think, give me 50 pounds or whatever, we'll see. And I'll be honest with you. I was like, how am I going to push this? This is not going to fly. People are not going to go for this. And so I started off, and so I started cooking with. I did make chili, and I used like beef and venison, and I made a chili. I made meatballs. I made meatloaf. I called it like super meatloaves because I was mixing like low-fat beef, a little pork, and venison. And to my shocking surprise, I'm cooking I remember the first time cooking the venison. I'm cooking. I go to thinking I'm going to go pour the grease off, and I'm like, there's no grease to pour off. This is amazing. And it didn't smell like I thought it would really have a very strong smell cooking it. But as I said, I did work it with other things, and I've done different things so that I put the recipe out and people could actually eat it. It makes a big difference. Someone could try it because people do get, and to my surprise, they love venison. So the venison flies out of there. Surprise. I love a good surprise. So now they will bring us. I said, bring me how much you want, and it'll all go.
The Hunters Share the Harvest program is clearly having an impact on food insecurity in Massachusetts. Again, the program has served nearly 100,000 meals to families in need. But remember, that's not the primary objective of the program. It's a management tool to reduce the number of deer on the landscape. While that in itself is not unique, what is unique is how Massachusetts is leveraging funding to support the program in its objective of reducing deer densities. Early indication is that it's already working.
Certainly from a management standpoint, that is the first and foremost responsibility of this program. We have really a unique situation here where we also have Pittman Robertson funds going towards this project, which is very unique. Almost no other state has that as a partial funding source for their programs. And the reason that we have that is predominantly from a deer management standpoint. And with that, we had set very clear goals that we wanted to essentially, by the time we get out to a 5-10 year time frame, in all of our high overabundant zones are really urbanized areas where access is a main constraint and where we really have to convince local community members how important hunting is from a deer management standpoint. Our goal is to really get above about 5% of all the deer that are being harvested to being donated, because at that point, it's really having an additive mortality effect on those individual zones. And we've already actually made it there in some of the zones. In year 3 was the first year where we made it in any of our zone. On Nantucket, we got up to 6% of the deer donated on island. This year, the lead is currently with Martha's Vineyard, where over 10% of all deer that were harvested have already been donated to the program. And so at that point, you're really starting to have an additive mortality impact. And to see, what the impact is there on the overall harvest, Martha's Vineyard, the overall season harvest is up 17%, and donations make up 10% of all harvested deer. So, a significant portion of the increase this year is coming just from donations. And that really shows the impact that you can have with additive harvest.
To support additive mortality of the program, hunters who donate a whole deer are given an additional antlerless permit for eastern zones in Massachusetts at no cost to them. So I asked Martin, besides supporting deer management objectives and helping to address food insecurity, are there any other clear benefits to the hunting community supporting a program like Hunters Share the Harvest?
The biggest pitch I can make is we hear so often from hunters about how non-hunters don't understand the importance of hunting and they are uncomfortable with hunting. And I can say we are making real differences in access, in trying to loosen up restrictions using just Hunters Share the Harvest as the mode for those changes. We have very real world examples in multiple communities across the state. One of the best ones we had recently is with the Amherst Conservation Commission. 2 years ago, they were looking at actually banning the hunting on Conservation Commission lands. We had just that year actually added a couple distributors right in the surrounding communities, including the Northampton Survival Center. And we talked about that publicly in those meetings. And many of the folks that were very concerned and frankly oppositional to hunting on those lands, when they found out the impact that was happening in their communities to the non-hunting public, it changed that perspective pretty significantly to the point where they ended up not putting any restrictions in that case. And we have multiple cases of like that across Massachusetts in just 3 years. And so this is why it is so key, because we are changing the hearts and minds. On Nantucket and Martha's Vineyard, 2 places where there are a heck of a lot of people that have never been exposed to hunting in their life, other than the fact they happen to be on islands with extremely high deer densities, we have been able to establish processing centers on island where now on both islands, for the food insecure, deer will be the central protein for their entire populations that are facing food insecurity. That is a monumental shift in places where people have never even considered game as a part of, people's diets. And so those extra donations that hunters make because they want to go out to the field for an extra afternoon. And, you think about that extra 20-minute drive. Well, maybe that 20-minute drive to a processor has a deer get to someone and get to a distributor where they wouldn't be able to, feed their own family. And now maybe that kid grows up and decides to go hunting because of what they saw in that package. Every one of our packages say that this was generously donated by a hunter in Massachusetts, because that's the key part of this. We could not do this without our hunters.
We started with a simple truth. hunters have always shared their harvest. Today, many hunters are channeling that instinct to include venison donation programs, a powerful tool for deer management that also quietly addresses a growing crisis: food insecurity. From Vermont wardens turning confiscated deer into meals for families, to a state-run program in Massachusetts using donated venison to reduce overpopulation and feed thousands. These programs show hunting at its best. They manage wildlife, support ecosystems, and put high-quality protein on the tables of those who need it most. If you have the opportunity, we hope you'll consider donating a deer next season. You can learn more about Venison for Vermonters and Hunters Share the Harvest programs on their respective fish and wildlife websites. Also, don't forget about NDA's nationwide venison donation map on their website. I'll include a link to that and everything else in the show notes, along with a link to Daniel's table. Also, please consider supporting your local food pantries and other food assistance programs. The fact is, there is food insecurity in every community in America. It's a growing problem. Yet just as the need grows, our visibility into the problem is fading. The current administration has canceled the USDA's Household Food Security Report, the key national measure of hunger since the 1990s. We're losing crucial data at a critical time, so those fighting this problem on the front lines could use your support now more than ever. All right, that is it for this episode of Conservation Cooperative. Stay connected with us at Backcountry Hunters and Anglers. You know where to find us. We're on all the socials. You can check out our website. Most importantly, become a member. Make a donation. We need you standing on our side as we work on behalf of our public lands, waters, and wildlife. Thank you so much for listening. We will talk to you soon.